as a country. I don't think it's the right time for us to be debating a constitution or anything to do with an amendment of the constitution. I think for me, there is what we call lack of priorities or lack of just having right vision to deliver to the expectations of Zambians. I think that is what we're experiencing currently. This government actually lacks priority. What we needed to be doing is to look at issues that affect Zambians directly. For example, we have a very burning issue, which is that of the high cost of living. Another burning issue is that of the energy sector. Fuel prices are extremely exorbitant. Another burning issue is the issue to do with corruption. The other burning issue is to do with delivery of the justice system, delivery of the justice system. Remember, currently we're experiencing a time when we've got very few judges, either in the High Court or the subordinate court having magistrates, unlike the number of cases that they are handling. So for me, I would have prioritized looking at or dealing with the number of judges, or perhaps employing more judges for us to ensure that we dispense justice as quick as possible, unlike looking at amending a constitution which does not actually require any amendment. Yeah.
Do you feel this document has a crisis and it needs urgent attention right now, like the way the UPND are putting it?
I've always held a view that if there is anything wrong with this constitution that we have, which is Constitution of Zambia Amendment Act number 2 of 2016, if there is anything wrong with this act, the best we can do is to subject any provision that we feel is wrong or has got a challenge or has got a lacuna or produces a repugnance, as the case may be, before this constitutional court for interpretation. So we've created a constitutional regime currently that has allowed a creation of a constitutional court. Now, this court in itself has been created for the sole purpose of ensuring that we interpret the Constitution of the Republic. When you look at Act number 2 of 2016, which is the Constitutional Amendment Act, it has provided for a constitutional court and the creation of the constitutional court. It has further indicated that any provision that appears to be problematic in the eyes of any person, or any provision that requires interpretation, ought to be interpreted by that court. So for me, I have always believed and I've always held a view that if this regime, for example, feels that any provision in the Constitution in its current form is problematic, it is highly important that they must let the Constitutional Court interpret that provision and give the relevant guidance. So the issue of wanting to amend the Constitution should have a basis. Currently, I don't think there's any basis for us to amend this Constitution as it stands, because I don't think the courts have given us any reason for us to want to amend the Constitution. So for me, I feel there's no need. If there's any provision that is requiring interpretation, let's subject it to the Constitutional Court for interpretation. Okay. Then we'll be guided.
So even looking at the so-called contentious issues that the UPND claims needs amendment, for you, that doesn't carry any base?
And you see, I want to take it that my colleagues may just be using wrong phrases or wrong English when it comes to describing certain provisions, because the Constitution in itself is a contentious document. There is no rational position that can be given by anyone to indicate that the Constitution is not contentious. Why I say the Constitution is contentious is because it is a people-driven document. This is a document that is given to ourselves by the people. That is why you find that the preamble of the Constitution says, we the people of Zambia give unto ourselves the Constitution. So because of that, the further issue is, by virtue of the fact that the interpretation of provisions of the Constitution requires a court which is designed to interpret this particular provision, that in itself creates contention. So every provision in the Constitution is contentious, and they've always been contentious, because even a comma in the Constitution is a contentious issue, because matters have been brought before court. In a Supreme Court judgment of Lewanika and others versus the AG, there was a contention. It should have been Dinmumba or something. There was a contention on a comma.
I think it's Dinmumba.
Yes, should have been Dinmumba. There was a contention on a comma. So the Constitution in itself is a contentious document. So for the UPND to try and massage the Zambian mind to say no, certain provisions are contentious and others are not contentious, we are therefore going to look at non-contentious issues, I think for me that is a joke of the century, because every provision in the Constitution is contentious. Just one provision that you can look at in the Constitution that is not contentious, then I think I would be mesmerized, because the entire Constitution is contentious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about consultation, Mr. Mukandila. Do you feel there was much consultation with the stakeholders, Tonse Alliance being one of them, and many other leaders out there? Could be the clergy, could be CSOs, could be political party leaders. Do you feel there was much consultation and engagement in relation to the amendment bill itself?
I think to begin with, we needed to first understand what government is trying to do. We also need to understand the jurisprudence of constitution making as well as constitutional amendment. By jurisprudence, I also mean the process and procedures that have existed. Historical background of our Zambian constitution, we must understand that the Zambian constitution has been amended on the premise of, one, a commission of inquiry being instituted, and further to that, terms of reference are given. There is a committee that is established to look at provisions that may be required to be included or amended or discussed. And there is also a further issue of consultation. Now, the consultation should be broad-based, where we're looking at stakeholders. The stakeholders will include the Zambian people as a whole. Now, bringing that down to the issue of stakeholders such as political players, political parties, we're looking at the church, we're looking at civil society organizations, we're looking at traditional leaders, we're looking at pressure groups, labor movements, we're looking at a broad-based consultative process. That is what is required in order to touch this constitution. So remember, the process of amending a constitution or refining a constitution or getting rid of the entire constitution will require that you need to consult the people. Now, there is need for us to create a need. The need will require that we need to have a need for us to amend the constitution. The Zambian people need to give the government a need to say this provision, for example, is problematic, and therefore we request that this must be amended.
So in short, the government shouldn't be the one to say we need to amend this.
It is not a government document. It is a people's document. We, the people, give unto ourselves a constitution. So the process of creating or enacting a constitution will only have legitimacy if it is driven by the people. And that is why you keep hearing that a constitution must be a people-driven constitution, not a government-driven constitution. So it should not originate from the government. The question is, government has currently provided for proposed amendments in this bill. Now the question is, who told government that those provisions require refining or amendment or repealing, as the case may be? No one has ever answered this question from government. Now, these are things that these are questions we have to be answered. Who has told government, for example, that we need to redefine the age group or an adult in the Constitution? Who has told government that today we need to provide for a precise provision that deals with ministers leaving office, for example, 90 days before a general election? Who has told government that we need that? Because the reality is, they have not consulted anyone. What is happening now, and the danger of having such a document, is that this document is being created out of selfish interests of being office today. That is the reality. Now, these selfish interests will only serve the interest of a minority group. And I can actually define this minority grouping as a clique of UPND cadres or UPND members of parliament or UPND members of cabinet. Those should be want to to begin with, a wrong process we're using. Second, consult us. Why then should government continue with this? So these are issues that the Zambian people have been asking. So for me, I believe we needed to reach a consensus as Zambians when touching the people's document. It should not be UPND waking up or in a cabinet meeting where they're having tea or discussing whatever and they just say, no, we amend the Constitution. No, it shouldn't. There are provisions in this Constitution, for example, that deals with ministers leaving office. That amendment, for example, that proposed amendment. Why should you deal with something that is a foregone issue? Because the courts have already given us an interpretation. Remember in the case of Greyford Monde and other ministers versus the AG, was it, and the AG also, was it Laz or Gears initiative? So, it's a foregone issue. The courts have already interpreted on that. They've guided with regards to what ought to happen. And we saw ministers paying back government on the monies they received from government during the time frame they stayed in office. And I'll call it illegally. Now, we've got a roadmap as to what it means. Why then should we look at that same provision again? So that's where you see that our colleagues may be operating in a bubble of their own imagination. We don't understand why they want to continue with such amendments when the courts have already given guidance. The other provision to do with 14 days for hearing and determining an election petition, a presidential election petition. The courts have already given guidance as to what it means to hear and determine an election petition within 14 days. So we know what 14 days is. Going forward, if we are faced with a scenario where we've got a presidential petition, we'll be able to know that within 14 days this matter has to be concluded. Why then should we revisit that? Because the courts have already given guidance.
So that's retrogressive.
Why should we? The reason why we've got the courts is because there's what we call judge-made law. Law can actually be created by the courts. And that is the reality. So if our colleagues are going to wake up and say, no, we need the wording they've been using is that we need to be specific. We need, they've been indicating that we need certainty of provisions. But the question is, the certainty was given to you by the courts. Why else are we looking at these provisions? So realistically, we need to look at these provisions with a realistic mind, and we should not want to put in provisions for the sake of trying to massage your ego or massaging your stay in government or cementing your stay in government. Mm-hmm. The reality is, I'll go to a provision, yet another provision that our colleagues want to amend, for example.
Okay.
The UPND, and I've been laughing, I've heard sections of the UPND lying to the Zambian people that we need to get rid of by-elections, we have to save on costs, and that's the reason why we want to amend the constitution, but we should not be having by-elections. But that is a lie. The provisions of this Amendment Act indicate that, for example, I'll read on the amendment of Article 72. Mm-hmm. It says, that is proposed amendment number 9. It says Article 72 of the Constitution is amended by the deletion of clause 2H and the substitution thereof of the following is disqualified in accordance with the Constitution. And then it says B, the deletion of clause 8 and the substitution therefore of the following. Where a vacancy in the National Assembly for a member of Parliament, the Speaker shall, so where a vacancy occurs in the National Assembly for a member of Parliament, the Speaker shall, within 7 days of the occurrence of the vacancy, inform the Electoral Commission of Zambia of the vacancy in writing, and the political party that sponsored the member who held the seat shall elect another person to replace that member to assume the seat to the National Assembly. Now, where does it say that there will be no election? They are talking about expenses to the national coffer. I read the other day someone saying, no, we've spent so far 30 million quarter on by-elections, but this provision here has only guaranteed a seat belonging to a political party that won that seat in a general election. It has not provided that there shall be no election to replace the person that has, to replace the MP because of the vacancy. It goes on to say, the Speaker shall, in fact, you see, let's not lie to Zambians. It's very funny. Let's not lie to Zambians. If there will be no by-election to be held, or if there will be no election perhaps to be held, why then should the Speaker inform the Electoral Commission? Because if the intention was for us not to have any election or any cost whatever on the coffers of government, what this provision would have indicated was that the Speaker will just inform the political party that occurred the vacancy to replace the MP, the Member of Parliament, and not to have an election. But the wording of this is that where a vacancy occurs in the National Assembly for a Member of Parliament, the Speaker shall, within 7 days of the occurrence of the vacancy, inform the Electoral Commission. For what? You can only inform the Electoral Commission if it is anything to do with elections. That is their mandate.
Okay.
So now, further to that, let me just, it's extremely important for Zambians to understand that our colleagues have been lying.
Okay, please go on.
Let them not lie to the Zambian people. There is no saving that is being made the reality is the Speaker shall inform the Electoral Commission, and the Electoral Commission, it goes on to say, in writing, and the political party that sponsored the member who held the seat shall elect. So you can only inform the Electoral Commission if you want to mandate them to manage an election. I don't know if you understand.
Yes.
You are only informing them if you want to mandate them to manage an election. So in this case, if you're going to inform the Electoral Commission and the political party shall elect, it simply means that you are only going to get rid of the fact that many other political parties will participate in an election. But rather, you will have one political party participating in an election, and the Electoral Commission of Zambia shall have the mandate to ensure that there is an election. This is what the amendment, the proposed amendment says. Not what they are lying to the Zambian people, that there will be no election. This is a cost to government coffers.
Okay. Mr. Mukandila, you being a qualified lawyer, I want to get it from you. I know there are a lot of people that are watching us right now. I want to find out, how do we arrive at a bill? What's the procedure? And you giving us that answer, do you feel the right procedure was, followed for the UPND to reach, at this stage right now?
You see, there's procedure provided for in the Constitution as to how a bill is arrived at, whether a private member's bill or a bill that is generated by government. However, what we're looking at is not an ordinary bill. What we're looking at is a bill affecting the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia. Now, we're looking at a bill that determines the democracy of this country. Mm-hmm. So it is democracy at play here. We're looking at the grand norm. This document, the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia, is called the grand norm. Mm-hmm. It is what we're looking at. And this constitution can only be arrived at, or the bill can only be arrived at, upon consulting the stakeholders involved.
Which are?
Now, which are the people. Remember, it is not a document for a section of society, no. We give ourselves a constitution. The preamble of the Constitution of the Republic says, we the people give unto ourselves a constitution. It doesn't say, I, President Hakainde, give unto my country a constitution. No. Neither does it say, we, the UPND, give unto the Zambian people a constitution. It doesn't. So we have to be consulted as the people. I refer to the jurisprudence of constitution making in Zambia. Mm-hmm. We've always had reports, consultation made, and reports have been given from Ngomba, whatever, CRC. These reports have been there for a reason. It's because we have wanted to give this constitution legitimacy. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you legitimize a constitution when you only have a section of society, whether it's the minister and her team, whether it's President Hakainde and his team, is coming up with provisions to propose, which provisions are not even making sense. I don't think there was even more consultation done when coming up with these provisions. Because for me, I feel if there was proper consultation done, for example, we wouldn't have been dealing with a provision that deals with ministers leaving office.
Just on that,
so the process of coming up with an amendment to a constitution must never be compared to the process of coming up with a bill to amend or coming up with any other law. It's not. It must not.
So in short, the
constitution
was not followed, right?
No. Remember, the reality is we don't really have a precise procedure, an act that has provided for a procedure on how to come up with a constitution. However, we've got a constitutional provision that has provided as to how you can amend a bill. An act of parliament. But the Constitution of Zambia is not an ordinary act of parliament. It is a grand norm. It requires consensus from the people involved. Now, the stakeholders are not only the members of parliament. No. members of parliament are actually stakeholders to the constitution-making process. They are part of the stakeholders. These stakeholders also include traditional leaders. They include political parties. They include civil society organizations. We need to be asked to say, is how can we, are there any provisions that you feel we must amend? Recommendations have to be given to government in order for us to come up with a bill like this. Not where government just dreams, wakes up from a dream and thinks of amending only provisions that deal with election, provisions that deal with emoluments or enumeration. You will realize that the only provision that does not deal with either a position or election or emoluments is the one that defines who an adult is. The rest of them, that is all they're trying to do, cementing positions, or perhaps trying to create positions for their friends. What justification will it give for this government to suggest that we need to reduce the age limit for someone to qualify to be the #1 civil servant in this country? With the confusion happening in the civil service today, where we've seen permanent secretaries being or coming out to be very politically active, that is indiscipline in the civil service definition. You can't, you're a civil servant as a permanent secretary. You cannot be politically active in that manner. Where we are seeing presidential advisors who are civil servants actively getting engaged in politics. No, we shan't allow that.
Okay.
And there in itself shows how much of a compromise that is going to be if we are going to bring in a person who's not experienced to run the affairs of the civil service.
Mr. Mukandila, looking at, I'm sure you've gone through thoroughly the bill itself, and I know in your view you've got certain provisions that you feel were not even supposed to be proposed for amendment. Can you mention one or two of them that you feel, these provisions were not even supposed to be proposed for amendment?
I will actually tell you that the provision that was not even supposed to be brought in for amendment, to be even proposed. One of them is the issue to do with the secretary to the cabinet. Come on, guys. This is a person who's the #1 civil servant, and you want them to have 5 years experience. That is uncalled for. The #1 civil servant should be entrenched in the system. Entrenched in the system. This person must have the relevant experience and maturity to run government processes and procedures, to run government systems. You can't decide to degrade that. Remember, the civil service is a continuous wheel that works with governments of the day. It's a system. It is not a political institution. It is non-partisan, for crying out loud. And that is why we keep reminding our colleagues to say, can we start respecting civil servants? They are non-partisan. And don't align them to any political party. Because whether you are PF or you are PF recently or in the previous regime, you are PF today or UPND tomorrow, it doesn't matter. As a civil servant, you work with the government of the day. And that's how it is. It is an insult to the civil service to align any person in the civil service as having belonging to a particular political party. And that's a mistake that we've been making in this country. We've politicized the civil service, which is extremely uncalled for. That requires serious action. And I've been on record calling for an affirmative action. Now, this affirmative action ought to be taken by the Secretary to Cabinet. Reminding our colleagues to say, you cannot actively be involved in politics. You've got the right to belong to whatever organization. It's a freedom of association guaranteed by the Constitution. But you cannot actively involve yourself in politics.
Or you have to resign, maybe.
Or resign, leave the civil service. Stop playing with Zambian people's money. So this provision was never supposed to even be proposed. For me, even the provision that deals with elections, the issue of by-election, they needed to put the provision in a proper manner. Not where you come to the Zambian people and lie to them that no, we're getting rid of elections because of the cost implications. And the reality is, the only thing you are doing is to ensure that you guarantee a seat that is gotten by a political party, and yet you still subject people to elections. It's still a cost. That is the reality. So guaranteeing a seat does not amount to you saving on cost for a by-election. Perhaps our colleagues needed to rethink certain provisions before even putting them in this act.
So do you feel it was done in a rush? This document?
It clearly shows. My brother, listen. And this is where I say our colleagues are not honest with themselves first, before they can even come to the Zambian people. If this document was correctly done, it would have had the right language and the right intent would have been seen. With this document, it shows that they did not even know the provisions they were putting across. Because what these colleagues are telling us is, we want to stop by-elections, one. We want to ensure that we save on costs of the elections. If that was their intention, they wouldn't have crafted this provision in this manner. They wouldn't have provided for Electoral Commission of Zambia to go and conduct yet another election. They would have been ingenious enough to provide for a provision that requires that the person who is an independent, for example, leaving office or creating a vacancy, you will not go back to conduct a by-election, but perhaps you are going to look at political parties that have got a proportion. In their proposed proportional representation, they would have said, we will look at a political party with a proportion to allow it to qualify for a seat, to be the ones to occupy the seat created by an independent member of parliament. That would have been an ingenious way of doing it. Not where they say, no, you go to Zambian people and say, no, we are avoiding by-elections, but yet when an independent member of parliament creates a vacancy is created where there is an independent person, whether a member of parliament, whether a council chairperson, or mayor, or councillor, you go for a by-election. And then what will you have solved? 1 + 1 is equal to 2. But here, what we are seeing is 0 + 0 is equal to 0. Nothing has been solved. So our colleagues should be very honest. This is a rushed document. They needed more consultation. We needed to put in our input. We needed to put in our input as stakeholders. For example, the issue of delimitation. You want to come to the Zambian people to tell them to say no. Is because there's not been any equal distribution of resources in terms of CDF. Bwana, have you even understood what CDF is all about? What was the intention of the Zambian people giving ourselves CDF? Do you even know that the CDF in itself as a fund is a provision of the Constitution, but the stipulation of the amount to be given to a particular constituency is not stipulated? It doesn't say CDF shall be distributed equally as a figure in the Constitution. It just said there shall be a constituency development fund created. So it simply means if you feel Matero is not receiving enough money, Bwana, just increase the money that you are giving to Matero. If you are giving them 36 million, give them 50 million.
According to the size of the Constitution.
That's all. The constituency, yes, that's all. These are things, you see, our colleagues needed to understand what even these provisions indicate. Because, see, the limitation as a provision, for example, it is provided that ECZ will look at boundaries of constituencies every 10 years. So now, if we had genuine people around, they would have said, okay, I feel Milengi constituency or Lavushmanda constituency, which is in Fue, is too huge, too big, so we're going to cut it. Not cutting it per se, we'll reduce the boundaries to a certain level. The boundaries for the next constituency, which is perhaps Malambo, is it Mambwe or Malambo, will be this here. You get it? So you increase this side and reduce the other side to ensure that you know to say the boundaries of this constituency have changed. It's no longer as big or as vast as it was. Now that perhaps government has even built more schools, more secondary schools that have created polling stations. So the boundaries will change to this so that we are able to distribute resources properly. But our colleagues don't understand that. You see, there are certain things that would have actually been provided for in the political parties bill or political parties act. Now, we are dealing with a government that does not want to consult the technocrats genuinely.
Okay.
They want to deal with politicians. Politicians will come and go, but go and consult the technocrats. How best can we ensure that delimitation achieves the purpose that we want to achieve? Perhaps we feel certain constituencies are too vast. What can we do to ensure that we make them sizable? Delimitation is provided for. Change the boundaries, Bwana. Just change the boundaries. There's nothing wrong with that.
All right. Let me just get to remind our viewers. Viewers, in case you're just tuning in, we still have some minutes to accommodate you. And I'm sure you can see the number showing on the screen right now. You can start calling that number and you'll be part of the program. This is Millennium Tonight. I'm featuring National Youth Chairperson of Tonse Alliance, Mr. Celestine Mukandila, who is with us today. So we were expecting Mr. Paul Shalala, who is the UPND consultant, but unfortunately he couldn't make it, and also Brian Hapunda from the Socialist Party. You can come through and be part of the program. You can call the number right now, and we'll put you live on Millennium Tonight. Now, Mr. Mukandila, let's briefly talk about the proposed increase in the number of MPs. Looking at the size of the parliament and looking at government expenditure right now, do you feel this was a right proposal?
You see, we need to examine our colleagues' intentions. It's extremely important. The Zambian people have to examine our colleagues' intentions. Currently, very laughable indeed. Yesterday, government told the Zambian people that there is no money to employ resident doctors who were volunteers. And yet, our colleagues want us to increase the number of members of parliament. That means you are increasing the number of GXs that they will have to buy. You are increasing the cost on the coffers. You will have to find another parliament building, because that building will not contain even numbers that we have. For example, right now the numbers we have are not even enough. So what is government telling the people? Why should we increase numbers in that fashion, looking at the cost implication, and yet want to claim that we are broke as a country? For me, I would have told you that instead of increasing these MPs, employ those doctors, because you'll be dealing with saving a life. Because our colleagues will just come and create more debate in the National Assembly. That is a reality. You will just create more debate as we come up with such bills. Employ those doctors. If it were up to me, I would instead suggest that we employ more judges in the High Court, because the number of cases that are being heard today by a single judge leaves much to be desired. And that is why justice is not being dispensed on time. Remember, the adage which says that justice delayed is justice denied. That's a reality. Why can't we increase the number of judges? I think for now, I can say we've become a country of jokers. We are joking, colleagues. We are joking. This is a fallacy. If you're going to deal with issues to do with women representation, the youths, and the differently abled persons, the provision is there in Article 259. This government should have showed the Zambian people how genuine they are by first ensuring that we have youths even nominated. Because the president has got 8 spots to nominate. Why is it that he has decided not to nominate youths? Nishwari Tsura. So that is the reality. The Zambian people need to know. The youths out there need to know that they will not come to you today and lie to you that they've got a heart to want to entrench you into their systems when they cannot show it. They don't have the political will to show the youths that you can employ them or engage them into positions of leadership, or perhaps even nominate them. If this was a genuine government, and I will tell you this without fear or favor, if this was a genuine government, do you know that the illegal by-election that was created in Kawambwa, where we had an MP in the name of Honorable Chilangwa, who was a differently abled person occupying that seat, if this was a genuine government, they would have decided that since the person that was occupying this constituency as member of parliament was a differently abled person, we shall adopt a person who is another person who is differently abled. So that we replace this person, we ensure that the numbers do not dwindle. But this is not a genuine government. Or perhaps they would have said, we're going to adopt a woman or a youth. But what we are seeing in this government, and this is the reality, what we are seeing is this government deciding to appoint independent youths. And I call them independent youths because they were youths in Rhodesia. Look at the appointments that are there. So we do not want to sound like we are discriminating on the appointments, but let's be genuine as a government. We need to be genuine. And that's what it calls to be a leader. A leader must do the right thing even where no one is saying. It's called integrity. Let's have integrity. Before we advance such provisions, let's look at what is obtaining. Currently, the law provides that there should be equitable nomination or appointments of persons with disability, the youths and women. Do we have that? No, we don't.
What's your comment on the number of people with disabilities in terms of representation? 3 only. How fair is that?
That is why I'm saying our colleagues needed to even consult more. Now, these are constituents, I mean, they are seats that will be distributed by way of proportional representation. And we only decide to have 3 who are differently abled. That is totally unfair. If it were up to me, I would say those that are differently abled should even have more seats than women, because you may at some point have women who are adults. They are not youths. You may at some point have women who are well-abled and they will have more seats in parliament, having constituency-based seats. So for me, I feel we needed to have genuineness. And the genuineness ought to have come from our colleagues indicating that, listen, instead of having 3 from these 20 who are youths, we are going to get 10 or 5 to put on the differently abled. but it's an issue of genuineness. Our colleagues are not honest.
They are not honest.
They are not honest. If it were the fact that they were honest, they would have even consulted more when coming up with these provisions.
All right. Looking at the cries of the people out there, we've seen the clergy, we've seen CSOs, and we've seen, political party leaders and many other leaders, could be some traditional leaders, saying this is not the right time to push for the amendment of the Constitution. Do you see the UPND withdrawing this?
Well, for me, I will tell Zambians any day, any time. I've made this statement before. I don't think our colleagues will withdraw this bill. Our colleagues want to amend this Constitution, devoid of what we think. I think they don't think it must be a Zambian Constitution. My opinion is they feel it must be a UPND Constitution. And the reason is because the provisions as to how they gave us a roadmap also indicated that we needed to have consultations for a very short period of time. And they also indicated that within this time frame, making it very certain, we'll have a bill given. Within this time frame, the bill will be presented before the National Assembly. They gave us a map, a precise timetable. It simply means that whether we like it or not, that is what they will follow. They will not roll back. But there is no rush. That's the reality. There is no rush. Because it shall not affect anyone if we decide that we look at this amendment next year after the elections in September. There's nothing wrong with that.
So according to you, that could be the right time?
Well, if our colleagues brought this, we were of the view. Remember, at some point, we even uploaded the UPND government that they want to amend the Constitution within a year of getting office. We were okay with them looking at the Constitution in 2022 or 2021. Or perhaps we were okay with them looking at this Constitution in 2023. Why are we looking at it now? Do we have enough time when we are going into a contentious period of election to consult? And by consultation, I mean consulting stakeholders.
Okay. Mr. Mukandila, why are you, especially the opposition political parties right now, why are you pushing for the withdrawal of this bill?
It's an issue for me. Personally, I will tell you.
I want you to give me your personal opinion. Why are you pushing for this bill to be withdrawn? Is it because Bill 10 didn't pull through and you want to see Bill 7 also fall?
I will tell you, comrade, that in 2014, as I did my LLB, I wrote a paper which I am extremely happy that is coming to life, and I've been seeing it coming to life. In that paper, I proposed that the best electoral system for Zambia, perhaps, is proportional representation. This was a proposal that was in Bill 10. For me, I say this is coming to life. In that paper, I proposed that the best way of resolving minority rights and majority rights will be to ensure that we devolution of power. And in the 2016 Amendment Act number 2, the Constitution of Zambia, it has provided for devolution of power. I told myself to say my research paper is coming to life. I said we need to entrench minority rights into the Constitution. I was happy to see that we went for a referendum to try and entrench minority rights into the Constitution, into the Bill of Rights. But it did not pass, sad enough. However, there is a provision that deals with proportional representation. Do I think that proportional representation would be the best electoral system for this country? The answer is yes. I believe it's going to be the best electoral system because it's going to ensure that even the minority political party participates in the governance issue of the country. But we must be able to create a system as to how we want to implement proportional representation. This government has not provided for a roadmap as to how they want to implement proportional representation as an electoral system. But it's important that we understand how we're going to go about it. This proposed bill has only indicated that as prescribed, the proportions of these seats shall be distributed to political parties after an election as prescribed. But what is the prescription? We need to know. We can't just get into something if the prescription is that whoever it is that has got a president in the National Assembly, whichever political party has got a president, is the one that will get all the seats on the proportional representation. It's going to be unfair.
What was your prescription the time you were writing about proportional representation?
For me, I say the proportional representation model we should have adopted should have been a party list system, okay, where we agree from the onset to say if we are going for an election, say this is PF. PF will tell the Zambian people. Yeah, PF will tell the Zambian people that this is our list. The person who's on top is going to be president. Will no longer be voting for people or persons. Will be voting for political parties. So when we are voting for this political party, this is our list. The person who's on top is the president, is President Edgar Lungu. The one who's on number 2 will be his running mate, is, for lack of shine, just as an example, Celestine Mukandila. The person who's going to be number 3 will be in the National Assembly. Depending on the proportions of the seats, the number of votes that you get in the National Assembly will be the amount of seats you have. That is what my proposal was. If only our colleagues can provide for the structure as to how we want to have proportional representation, I would never have a problem with that. Some of us will even say we are having our papers actualizing, coming to life. Because I wrote them a research paper. It's an academic paper that has to come to life. But as it is clear that our colleagues don't want to read these papers that we've been writing.
Okay. So you just said that this is not the right time to push for the amendment of the Constitution.
So you see, I want you to understand.
Okay, let's just pick up a call. Before you make me understand, let's just pick up a call, Mr. Mukandila. Sorry to cut you short. Let's pick up a call. Hello, good evening. Bueno Mulishani. Okay, tuwe question amletu mina kwiza. Atubana nishina?
Elvis Mulonda.
Ba Elvis Mulonda.
Yemkwaye.
Randen tumfe ba Elvis Mulonda.
Yemkwaye tulanda ko pali yo ile topic kwa constitution amendment.
Yemkwaye.
Ama constitution avesa mukuletayo nga chakwe batishita ya paramira. Ulwa kuvota. Abantu bakule munana kali mulimbi alefu kuba favoring amwamonaka. So ikyabako lero nga chakwe batu alefu okuleta ama constitution nga baletere kunu kunota papali no nshita tule muna tule atowaje nani kani campaign apa fwewe ngi tule muna na kali mulimbi fyako wa favoring afye mukufo okuwera again mu government. So ito tena mwandini fwewe mbita tatukwe dokusekera musa.
Okay.
Emukwai. Contribution yandini mwandini kulanda.
Okay, ba Elvis Mulonda twatachapa kutumira kwa phone twatotera sana. Mkwai. Okay, you can also call on the same line that is showing on the screen right now to be part of the program. Feel free to interact with us live on Millennium tonight. And I'm now joined by Mr. Oliver Shalala, who is the UPND consultant Welcome to the program, Mr. Shalala.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks, comrade, for being with you on the panel. Yeah, I must apologize to the listeners and the viewers. Yeah, but however, I think I got here on time.
Better late than never.
Yes.
Anyway.
No, I got here on time. I wasn't late, but there was no seat for me, so I had to wait for somebody to put the seat for me.
All right. It's good to have you on the program, Mr. Shalala.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right. Let's pick up. Okay, we're done. You can still get to call us back. We are not yet done with the calls, but that phone call just cut. Let's pick up one more call before Mr. Mukandila can react to the calls as well as Mr. Shalala. Hello. Good evening. Choma bwino tikamba na wandani obomu nsanje kambani timvere obomu nsanje
Na choma bwino ine
bwino bwanji bomu nsanje
ikambeko naye pepakani ya Malamulo. Nakufunza oti mu Zambia ina time mtepo amene itola kuti time ndiye pe panga Malamulo. Namba 2 odi muno muziko Malamulo amene tingafake imozi kuti toze takamba kuti Malamulo ilipo kwa jamene niziva ni chakuti lero tungakambeko kuti kenti zimanga vakawalala 100 years ushe vakawalala vazapomera Malamulo vazaipomera vezi vazaipomera oni vajamene si vakawalala ndiye vamene vazaipomera chifukwa chakuti valema kuperewa koma vamene akumba azakana kamene tikamba ni I think muli mu one party state yasembe Tilali na democracy amene tilili na thousand asembe litu suna jioni kwa takambatero mu 1964 maya mupizi nominated vanalite elected vanalistic which came to 75 and by that time population inali 3.5 so kufika lero na MP angati na nominated angati and the population ilipasi ngati Kakabatero ba PF pembe finali na vanashusha vantu venangu kuti vasapange province kuja kumuchinga ikambe kuti vasapange province kumuchinga chifukwa cha vanali kumfuna kukhalirira mpawa pala pamene vanali kupanga ma districts yaya nama consultation na munga Chirundi anali kufuna kuti vanafuna chitukukora kukhalirira angati nani reason is why va PF lero mupawa kushe mukafaka ma consultation like yose mwafaka muno murusaka mwafaka muno namba yama voters ichinja registered voters sikuti vantu vamozi da tisahambe kudima Zambia chifukwa kuti mwayamba kapatulula kuti kapena vakafaka province kumuchinga vafuna chabe kuti kumuchinga ukhale bwino tikumuchinga kuja naye tuna mabusiness kuenda kukhala ni one Zambia one nation otherwise Malamulo kenji afade tufuna ide amene inali kuchitika kuti kawalala alipa mpando mapoto hapa alipa mpando ankhalirira tufuna bija tufuna vama MPs kukhalirira mpando paka kama elections wasenza mamotoka yatu tufuna jija wapa salama allowance tufuna jija
Omunsanje
tufuna bajuwe consultation haya makliniki yapige kujitulika parodi hapo napige kujitulika teachers yapage kujitulika na maschools yapage kujitulika Mungu akudali sana
zikomo kwambiri Omunsanje. All right, I'll let Mr. Mukandila finish up your thoughts as we go on to Mr. Oliver Shalala. You were on the floor. And you can also get to react to the calls that have come through as well. 2 calls from Elvis Mulonda and Omunsanje before we move on to Mr. Shalala.
Yeah, probably it's extremely important. I was saying it's extremely important for us to understand that there is no time frame provided for a bill, for example, or a law to be presented before the National Assembly, if we have to enact it. And that is where I think our colleague indicated, was it Elvis, as to say, do we have a time frame, or Bomun Sanje indicating to say, do we have a time frame as to where Zareta Malamulo? No. There is no time frame. You can introduce a bill at any time, you get. But our concern has been that we are not dealing with an ordinary bill. We're dealing with a constitutional amendment bill. The Constitution is the grand norm. And this Constitution has provided that any other law, for example, that is inconsistent with this Constitution, that law shall be declared a nullity. Why? Because it is the mother of all acts. Now, this Constitution in the preamble has provided that we, the Zambian people, give unto ourselves a constitution. So because of that, all we are requesting of our colleagues is, can we consult the stakeholders in total? Can we not decide to give an excuse that we are going to look at previous reports and previous recommendations as to what ought to be amended? Because dynamics change with time. For example, barely 5 years ago, in Zambia, very few people understood what cryptocurrency was or what Bitcoin was. But now we've got an introduction of digital money, digital currency. So even where we're trying to come up with a constitution amendment bill, we should be able to put in mind the fact that we must also think of such dynamics in terms of changes in time. So there's nothing wrong with coming up with a bill anytime or whatever. No. What we are saying is, in terms of the timing, is this time that you've given us as government will not be enough for us to all put in our input. Because my grandfather, Kwamatanda, will need to put in an input as to how they feel this constitution has to be amended. And that bill will have to be printed to my grandfather in Shiremba. You get it? My cousin in Mazabuka will need to equally have an input to put in this bill as to how we intend to come up with it. Now that bill will need to be interpreted in Chitonga. That's the reality. But do we have time to do that with a time frame? Because like I told you, it's a foregone issue. Government has made a decision to give us a constitution. This is the government-driven constitution. They've given us a time frame. Whether we like it or not, we've seen they are moving with the same time that they've given us.
Okay. Mr. Shalala, what is your thought on, the submissions from the callers, first of all, before we get down to the main issue?
So thanks again for inviting me. I think the first caller, Elvis, is talking about the timing. Constitutional amendment, saying that it seemed to be made towards elections, done in such a way that it favors the youth to prolong its. That's his view. Though Musanje comes back after Elvis and says what Elvis is talking about is not correct. There's no such thing as the best time the Constitution. So now, in answering Elvis, I would say that in reality, this particular amendment, one of the few actually, which is being done a year before the election. If we go in the history of Zambia, I'm a layman, but I can confidently say all the amendments. One, the amendment of 2021, the amendment of 72, 67. All these, except for 67, of course, the one that was being done to remove the referendum. But the rest of them, they were done in the actual election year. Even the attempt, my friend here from PF, the attempt that they made as PF to bring the bill 10, it was being done in the election year, 2021. So our particular amendment is actually being done a year before. So if you look at the timeline, it's actually being done a year and a month plus. So in terms of timing, this is the one that for the first time is being done a year before. All the rest of the amendments were done in the actual election year. So that argument falls off. Secondly, my colleague accepts himself to say that there's no such provision as the best time in the Constitution. So meaning that if we follow the legal argument, his argument doesn't have a leg to stand on. So obviously they'll start talking about maybe a moral argument, social argument, or otherwise. But even that, I can address it. In terms of timing, it doesn't matter whether you do it in the first year, after you've won election, second year, third year, it will still be before the next election. So if you follow mathematics, every year that you do an amendment is before the next election. Okay. So you can't say, no, I think you can't stop me after a minute.
No, I'm listening.
My colleague spoke for 25 minutes.
I'm listening.
Yes.
I'm listening.
So let me just address some of the issues. Yeah, like I said, I was here in good time, but there was no seat for me to sit. So yeah, so that timing issue doesn't arise because first and foremost, whether we did this in 2022, 23, 24, 25, it will still be before the next election. So logically speaking, it falls out. Legally speaking, it falls out. So the only argument that my colleagues will have is obviously they'll say maybe moral. Again, those are normative issues. The question is, whose morals are you following? Now, if we go back to the issue of enactment, my colleague here is saying, no, his cousin, his uncle, and everybody have to be consulted, so they speak. And he even quotes the first three words in the Constitution that start with "we the people." Now, there's a misnomer here to think that "we the people" refers to just the general public and doesn't refer to other people. No, when we say "we the people" gathered, it's actually us as citizens speaking through our elected members of parliament. Constitutions are not made in NGO boardrooms. Constitutions are not made in cathedrals. They are made in parliament. It depends on the country how the constitution is done. For us in Zambia, we have what we call a unicameral parliamentary system where we only have one chamber, which is the National Assembly. And from there, that's where we do our lawmaking. So we don't have another way of making the laws. We don't make them through NGOs, through laws, through all these other. Yes, those are stakeholders, but ultimately, we Zambians by law give our powers to make the law to our members of parliament who speak for us. It's not us to speak. We can make opinions, but if ultimately, even the same NGOs that will make arguments, those to submit those arguments to a member of parliament to speak on the floor. There will never be a case where, we can make submissions to the executive so that when they write the original bill, they put in our feelings, and that has been done. So my colleague is shooting down the process of getting from the Vunga Commission, from the Wanakato Commission, from all these other, from the CRC and all these other processes which were done before. Now remember, this is not a repeal of the Constitution. We are not replacing the old Constitution with a new one. So meaning that we are doing amendments. The process of amending the Constitution of Zambia is very clear. It's outlined in Article 79, Council. So I would want to know in your next submission whether the process that the UPND government is following is at variance with Article 79. Before you even speak, I'll tell you, if you go through Article 79, which I can quote in case you're not sure about it, I can quote for you, is exactly the process we are followed. So one, in terms of legal process, we are on firm grounds. In terms of the logical process, we are on firm ground. Yes, there will be, like Musanja has clearly mentioned, there will never be a time when you have a law being made and everybody is agreed. So there will be variance, but that is provided for. Right now, as we speak, we are in the period of listening submissions. Those who want to make submissions to the government before the bill is presented, they have time to submit. And when the bill is presented, there may be changes based on these submissions made to government or the executive. And there's only one entity that is by law given the power and mandate to present a bill in terms of the laws and constitution, and that is the executive. So there isn't, when you say it's a UPND constitution, who else do you want to present the bill to parliament? There's no other person who's got the power. It's the government, which is the UPND government. So the same way when they were in power, as PF, they were presenting bills, is how we are doing it. The only difference is that For us, we have followed the law to the letter. So when you talk about timing, I think I've addressed that. When you talk about mandate and everything, there's nowhere where the UPND government has gotten it wrong. I'll be very happy if my colleague can quote the law itself and tell us where I've gone the law. The other arguments of morals and whatever, it depends where you come from, how you are cultured, your primary socialization, your secondary socialization, and even re-socialization feeds into who you are and how you feel and your exposure and all that. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about the law, we have to follow the law, and we have followed the law. We are on firm ground. We are on terra firma.
Okay. Now, people out there are saying, and some of them, top political leaders that have featured on this program are saying currently Zambia has got a lot of challenges, that the country is facing right now. There's load shedding, there's high cost of living, the performance of our economy in general. Why focus on amending the constitution when we have other major challenges that the UPND government should be focusing on?
First and foremost, it's a very simplistic way of looking at it and very, very unfortunate. You didn't give names. I would have loved to know who those leaders are.
One of the leaders that said that, let me give you one name.
Yes.
One of the leaders that said that is the Democratic Union President, Mr. Akim Anthony Njovu.
Okay.
He featured on this program and he said currently there's extensive load shedding right now. There's also the high cost of living, and our kwacha is not performing as expected.
Okay.
So obviously this is not the right time for the UPND to focus on amending the constitution. They should be focusing on, maybe reducing the inflation rate. They should be looking at reducing the high prices of commodities on the market. They should look at how they should, address the issue of load shedding.
Yeah, so the simplest way of looking at it, which is the short way of looking at it, is that one, amendments of laws are done by Parliament. Development programs are done by the executive. So I don't understand what that leader is talking about. Where does he expect the Parliament to stop amending laws and start addressing load shedding? No, that's not the way it works. We have three arms of government. We've got the judiciary. Are we saying because there's load shedding, then the courts should not sit and adjudicate over cases? No, we should proceed. So we are addressing load shedding. We have paid all our friends when they left in government. They left 500 million debt with Mamba Collieries. We've paid 300 million of that out of the 500, and because of that, Mamba Collieries is able now to open a new power station of 300 megawatts, to increase from the original 300 to be 600, to be launched in January. They left one machine operating at Kafueloa Gorge. We managed to raise our own money. Remember that the Chinese left Kafueloa Gorge because of the debt default. So we had to try and negotiate with the Chinese. They refused. We raised our own money through NAPSA. ZESCO has been able to open 4 more machines from 150 megawatts. Kafueloa is running at 750. Unfortunately, we had the worst drought in living memory in Zambia. If you check the numbers, it will show you last year's drought is even worse than the 91 drought. During their time, they only had a drought in 2017, not close to this. When they tried to declare a national disaster, the UN and World Health Organization and even the Food Agricultural Organization, all of them refused to declare an emergency. But for our case last year, it was declared an emergency. So because of that, even all the efforts we've done, it hasn't been easy. But there's been other efforts. Last month, we just finished 100 megawatts Samba solar plant. There's another plant which is just finishing in Choma for 60 megawatts. There's one in Serenge for 100 megawatts. There's one in Livingston. All those are solar, in line with the presidential directive of 2023, where we increased solar production from almost 60 where we were to about 1,000 in just a year. So there's been all these efforts. Now, do you want the executive to suspend what they are doing so that the legislature does laws? No. These things are not mutually exclusive. They can be done at the same time. And as at now, we are talking about the executive through the Ministry of Justice working on the amendments. The Ministry of Energy is working on load shedding. Then we've seen a decrease for 3 months in a row on petroleum because of the efforts that have been put in changing Kazama pipeline from bringing crude oil to diesel. So there's been so many efforts. We are talking about exchange rate. It's been going down. It's been very stable, actually. Of course, it's higher than where I would have loved it to be, but it's been very stable and it's been going down. So I don't understand when you look at those figures. Maybe the only one you can talk about is the cost of living, which has gone up in this period. But in the last few months, all the indicators have been very positive. So that argument also falls out. We are able to amend laws, at the same time address issues. One, because of the way the government is structured. You don't use the parliament to develop in terms of programming. Parliament can only come up with budgets and other policies which then the executive picks up. So that argument really doesn't hold fly.
Okay. All right, dear viewers, before we get to you, Mr. Mukandila, let me just remind the viewers that you can still call us live on the program. This is Millennium Tonight. I am joined by Mr. Oliver Shalala, who is a UPND consultant and National Youth Chairperson for Tonse Alliance, Mr. Mukandila, Celestine Mukandila, right here on the program. I know you wanted to react to, the comments coming in from Mr. Shalala, Mr. Mukandila.
Yeah, of course, I'll of course pardon Mr. Shalala, because at least he's indicated to the Zambian people that is not of council. Of course, Mr. Shalala, you may be aware that there is also a private member's bill that can be introduced by any member of parliament.
It still goes through the executive.
So, going further, it's extremely important to understand the provisions of Article 79. Article 79 gives the National Assembly, of course, the power to amend or alter the Constitution. And also, these provisions goes out without saying that you can only amend the Bill of Rights through a referendum. And that's what I tried to explain initially, that we had gone for a referendum in 2016, which failed, of course, as a matter of fact. But what we are indicating is, we are not refusing that the National Assembly has got the power to amend the Constitution. That is the mandate of the National Assembly, of the legislature. It is to legislate. There's nothing wrong with that. All we are saying is, can the Zambian people be given the right to put in submissions to these same amendments? Government has not categorically told us where or how they came up with these amendments, these proposed amendments. The only thing they've been saying is, no, we've consulted with the documents that are seated with us. But who has told you that we need to look at these ones almost immediately? I mean, no one is refusing, comrade, that you can introduce a bill in the National Assembly at any time. There's nothing wrong with that. You can introduce a constitution for amendment at any time. But the issue is, what document are you bringing on the table? We're not talking about moral issues here. It is democracy we're looking at. The rule of law. Process must also look at giving credence or legitimacy to the content. Now, what process have we used to come up with a people's document? If you are going to bring out an argument to say the National Assembly, members of parliament, are representatives of the people, and therefore whatever they say will have to go. If that were the case, whatever constitution we've ever had did not require these reports or these commissions to be instituted, as a matter of fact, if that were the case. But because we have told ourselves that we, the people, when coming up with these provisions in the Constitution, we have to ensure that we go for these consultations. Let people put in their submissions. There's nothing wrong with that. There is totally nothing wrong with people putting in their submissions. Now, maybe we can go into the Act. We were discussing the provisions of the contents of this Act, for example, comrade, before you got here. We brought to the fore the argument that this government has been bringing to say we're getting rid of by-elections. When we amend, we'll totally get rid of by-elections because we're going to save on costs. But the reality on the content of this provision suggests otherwise. It suggests that probably our colleagues, our colleagues in government, did not even read this document before you presented it to the people. Because the argument you are giving us, sir, with your comrades is that, is it not good that we should not have by-elections? Is it not good that we are spending 30 million? The last time I heard the Minister of Information lying to the people that, there is 30 million kwacha that is spent, that has been spent so far, is it not good that we can stop this expenditure? But the reality is the content of this provision indicates otherwise. I don't know if you've taken time to look at the content of the intended amendment, comrade.
The UPND is very clear. It has never said we are going to eliminate by-elections. What we've always said is we reduce on by-election costs. So in other words, there are by-elections we cannot avoid. For example, the only way we can avoid the by-election for an independent member of parliament is to ensure we stop having independent member of parliaments in parliament. So now, if we say there will be no independence, then we won't have any by-elections at all. Otherwise, all members of parliament that belong to parties, this time in this provision, once we have a member of parliament who belongs to a party either resign, die, or is disqualified by way of criminal conviction, then the party simply replaces the person. Then there's no by-election. The only by-elections that will continue are for independent member of parliament, independent mayors, independent councillors, as well as council chairpersons. And at no point did the UPND indicate that we want to eliminate by-elections completely. So it's interesting, Council, that you are trying to put words in our mouth. I'm one of the official spokespersons.
Is it okay for us to read the provision?
I'll be happy if you can mention a particular statement by any of the UPND spokespersons or minister where we said we want to eliminate completely. We never made a mistake. We never said that, and our records are very clear. Everything that we've submitted is exactly how it is in there.
Mr. Shalala, you are saying as UPND that you want to reduce the number of by-elections, obviously resulting into the reduction of the cost that goes into, having these by-elections.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you are proposing to increase government expenditure by obviously increasing the number of MPs in parliament.
Yeah, because it's a simple thing. Cost and benefit analysis. Firstly, we have laws in this country. We have to have a census every 10 years. Our friends were too broke to have one. It was supposed to be there in 2020, so they couldn't have it. So we had it in 2022 on behalf of them. And then there's delimitation, which they did partly, but they didn't release the result of the report. They did that
the same way that it's being kept a secret in
but we are releasing it before the parliament.
Or maybe comment before he can get to that. It's important for him to
allow him to have,
especially that you are 25 minutes.
Please go ahead.
Please go. Yeah. So the issue is that there was census in 2022. We had the limitation also done by the PF, and then we had to study that report and also make consultations. So there's been efforts made by the Delimitation Commission under the ECZ to go around and get submissions. Now, based on that, by law, we have to have delimitation every 10 years. Otherwise, we have a constitutional crisis. So that delimitation has to be done by January next year. So if we don't have delimitation by January next year, we have broken the law. On census, the census gives us specific numbers. Now we know where our people are, which constituencies have grown and all that. If we look at Lusaka, for example, if we follow the district itself, we have 2.9 million. The province has got 3.7 million. If we go backwards, that 3-point-something million was almost the whole country at 1964. So the way we were doing constituencies was different. As at now, it is very important. And I don't even see the argument, because our comrades were actually proposing more MPs than what we've proposed, based on the numbers they had in 2020. But the population has increased from 2020 to now. So what we are proposing is commensurate with the increase in population as well as actual development infrastructure. But more importantly, it's about devolution of development. We've decentralized development. We want the CDF to reach more people. There's a lot of change in the rural areas of Zambia. I think the mood in the rural areas is very, very positive. The UPND has done very, very well in those areas. So the more we have constituencies, the more we have CDF, which our colleagues was running at about 1.8 million per constituency. We increased 24.6 million. We are now running at 36.1. Now some constituencies are so big that they can be 120 kilometers long. And that constituency is probably can swallow the whole of Lusaka district, but Lusaka district has got 7 constituencies. Why should we have 7 by 32 million, which is about 200 million? 210 million in Lusaka district, when one constituency bigger than Lusaka is only getting 36. So we need to do all those delimitations and spread development in that way.
So maybe comment. It's extremely important for us not to lose the Zambians. The Zambian people are watching. I indicated the issue of the cost on by-election. Our colleagues are still giving an argument to say, no, we are not saying we're doing away completely with by-elections, but there will be no election. The party will just replace. But now, here's the thing. The content of this provision does not suggest that the party will just replace. The content is this. Probably, comrade, let me read this provision. When you look at amendment number 9, proposed amendment number 9, which proposes to amend Article 72, it says in 8, where a vacancy occurs in the National Assembly for a member of Parliament, the Speaker shall within 7 days of the occurrence of the vacancy inform the Electoral Commission of the vacancy in writing, and the political party that sponsored the member who held the seat shall elect another person to replace the member of to assume that seat in the National Assembly. Now, you see, as counsel, when I'm looking at the interpretation of this provision, the reality is the only reason why you would inform the Electoral Commission is because you're dealing with an election. That's the reality.
Yes.
Now, apart from that, because you're dealing with an election, it says the political party will hold, it goes on to say the political party that sponsored the member who held the seat shall elect. Now, how different is it going to be from the expenditure of the Electoral Commission? Because there will be an election, which is going to be intra-party. The only thing that has been cured by this provision, comrade, which is what is here, is that the political party that gets a seat at a general election will maintain its seat. But the issue of an election, it doesn't cure it, because the Constitution has been instructive. I mean, this provision has been instructive that Electoral Commission of Zambia will be informed by the Speaker. And why should you inform the Electoral Commission of Zambia? It goes further to say that party shall have an election.
Okay.
So meaning, in terms of costs, it is 0 plus 0 is equal to 0. In terms of cost, there is no cost that has been cut. But if you want to talk about issues to do with, in terms of increasing intra-party democracy, or ensuring that political parties get a candidate who is popular in the area, yes, we can say we're trying to cure this. But in terms of course, let's not lie to the Zambian people. It's important to come with clean hands and tell the Zambian people to say.
I've gotten it.
Yes,
I've gotten it the first time.
Let's get your reaction.
Listen, it's very simple. You are mixing two things. If there's intra-election and you call that a cost, it's not a cost on government.
It says Electoral Commission of Zambia will be informed.
Yes. The reason the Parliament is informing Electoral Commission of Zambia is because Electoral Commission of Zambia is the only body in Zambia that has got the mandate to actually announce a vacancy and then later announce the person who replaces after an election. In this case, we are replacing an election that is for the whole constituency, funded by the taxpayer, involving all stakeholders, police, Electoral Commission of Zambia, and everybody else who's involved. So the Electoral Commission of Zambia simply announces to say there's a vacancy now, and the UPND or the PF is invited to replace their person.
Comrade, it's important that the Zambian people are watching.
Let me continue.
No, but I don't want him to continue misleading Zambians. The Electoral Commission of Zambia has never been the one to announce a vacancy. You've seen the provision you are proposing. The Speaker is the only one that can announce a vacancy.
Council, are you going to allow him to speak?
You may proceed.
Yes.
You may proceed.
Yes, I don't think.
But it's okay if you don't understand the provision.
Okay, Mr. Mukandila, let him finish his point.
No, but we are dealing with Zambia.
Exactly. Let him finish his point.
If a provision is
comment as well.
I thought after you went to Tonse, you'd change from the way PF conducts itself.
Allow
me to speak.
Yes.
You may proceed, sir.
Yes. Listen, sir. The cost of an election is on the party internally. And this law does not prescribe how the election will be. It is up to the party based on the resources they have to decide how they will do it. Some may do it using the National Executive Committee. Others may vote using the actual constituency committee. It is up to the party. The party has got the power to decide how they do it. They can even just nominate. The president can even choose for the party. The law simply says, let the party elect and then bring. How that is done, whether it is a proclamation, whether it is raising of hands, whether it is repeat ballot, it's up to the party. Now, the ECZ only comes in at the point of notifying a vacancy, because they are the only ones who've got the power by law to announce a vacancy. And then when the party has nominated a person, ECZ will announce to say, based on the correspondence we have, the same way that ECZ announces when you do a nomination before election. You go with a certificate from your party, you say, I'm the one who's been given this adoption, here's my certificate, announce me as an adopted candidate. So even in this case, a replacement, there will be a certificate given to the person to say, you are the one who've endorsed, take it to ECZ. ECZ will announce. There's no cost by ECZ in monitoring the internal process of the party. I think my colleague is scratching on straws. Now, like I said, I can even keep quiet for the next 5-10 minutes. There's no provision that our colleagues find a problem in the provisions we found. All the submissions that have been made, I've not heard my colleagues pick up and say this particular one is bad because of this or that. All they talk about is process is not good, and yet Article 79 of the Constitution is simple in the way you amend the Constitution, and we are following that. Like I said, the argument will always be moral, let's consult the people. There's a difference between repealing a Constitution and amending one. When we are repealing a Constitution, it's a holistic approach. Like Roland Meat has been talking about this a lot, where let's postpone this so that we do a holistic constitution. There's nothing wrong with us doing that after this election. Particularly now, we have to amend those provisions that are affecting the election. For example, if we don't increase the number of constituencies, and yet we're just doing the limitation, we are postponing that problem by another 5 years, by which time there will be a bigger population. So we have to change to suit the population. If we wait, also in terms of development, which is, again, we delay development because of CDF, because we are now using the CDF model. We are not using central government for development in all these areas. So my colleague is talking about, is scratching on straws to try and tie ECZ cost to election in a party. No, there's no connection. ECZ will not go into a party and ask them to vote in a certain way. This law is very clear. The party will elect. How they elect is up to the party. Each party has got its own constitution which governs the way they do election. I know, for example, the PF, during Michael Sita's time, they had a way of electing, and the person who used to elect everybody was the president. So you vote for president, then he elects everybody. But it was called an election. You go to the convention, he gives you a list, you endorse. And it was ending like that. So, no, that's not correct. My colleague is trying to clash on thin straws. Let him bring a substantive argument for the last few minutes. Let's not waste people's time. All right,
let's get to move on from that. Briefly, there's a cry from the people out there. You know, some of them have called on this program asking why this bill wasn't even published in, certain local languages. Could be the major 7 local languages that we have in Zambia, so that people can, comprehensively understand this and make their submissions. And also, I want you to answer another question. Where do people submit their submission?
First and foremost, like I mentioned, submissions are made to the Ministry of Justice. You can submit. Right now, we are in the period of submission. Anyone is free to make submissions to the Ministry of Justice. They are the ones that compile the bill. So even now, to make amendments going to the next stage, which is presenting it to Parliament, the Ministry of Justice can still make some adjustments when we make the first bill. Of course, the bill is there. Changes will be made at second reading or at committee stage when people have made submissions. For now, we have a draft. It's a draft. It's not a final bill. Now, so we have a process. The timeline was given. 21st of June, the bill is introduced to Parliament. After, I think, 25th or 28th, second reading, at which stage there's a vote. And then the last reading, and then there'll be committee stage there. So you can submit during this time. We're in a period where anyone can submit. If we're looking at the process of having a Constitutional Review Commission and all that, we can still do another one after election to do a holistic approach. But these particular provisions we are looking at, these are key, especially before the election. They are meant to improve our situation before the election. Why should we postpone them for the other election, which will be 10 years from the last amendment? So the timing is okay. Like I said, he even agreed with us. There's no law that says this is the best time. So we are on firm ground. Like I said, the UPND government is on terra firma. In terms of consultation, the people have got the right to submit both to the Ministry of Justice as well as to Parliament. You can submit through your MPs. When they come to debate, each MP is going to be given a chance to debate. There will also be submissions from stakeholders to the committee. The committee itself will have a stage where you can actually go as Mukandila and submit to the committee at that stage. So I don't understand what the cry is about. All these months, all these weeks are going, it's just complaining, but they're not making actual submissions to the bill.
I've been directed by, there's one question that he hasn't answered, I'll come back to it, but I've been directed by my director that we are running out of time. I don't know what your comment is on publishing the bill in local languages.
No, it has been published in local languages.
Okay, how many local languages?
We have 7, the official languages.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and obviously, how accessible is that? Is it the same as the one in
Test it tomorrow. Test it tomorrow. Go and check if you can't find the copy you want. You'll find it.
It would have been better if Comrade perhaps addressed the issue of why we want to amend the provision that deals with ministers staying in office. And also why we want to amend the provision that deals with computation of time to hear an election petition. When these provisions were interpreted by the courts, and we've got a position, guidance has been given by the court. Why are we looking at things? Why are we wasting time on things?
It's a very simple thing. The Constitution is the supreme law. You cannot talk about case law and subsidiary laws like acts and then say we have these provisions.
No, but the Constitutional Court is mandated to interpret this Constitution. The interpretation, I'll give you one example, sir. The interpretation the Constitutional Court has given, for example, to deal with President Lungu not qualifying in 2026. I mean, it is law.
Yes.
Are you agreeing with me that it is law?
It's case law.
Are we agreeing that it is something that we need to follow?
It's case law.
Why don't we want to follow the judgment that was given by the Constitutional Court with regards to ministers leaving office? We've been guided.
That's what we are doing.
We need to end.
Actually, we are doing now. Just to put it on record. Just put it on record. We are actually doing exactly that. What we are doing is we are going to stop ministers from going 90 minutes before elections. Just like the case, 90 days, sorry. Just like the case law. We are also, the other one he mentioned where, what was the other one?
The 14 days.
Yes, the 14 days for, is case law. All we are doing is codifying case law. So we are just getting those judgments that were made and putting them in the Constitution to make it supreme. Because the Constitution is the supreme law. So why follow case law, which can be changed any day by any judge, when we can codify it into a Constitution, which is supreme and it will stay safe like that.
And so any judge can come and interpret it how they want, as long as there's change of government.
Let's have your concluding remarks as we end.
No, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you very much to the listener, the viewer, and the Zambian people. All I can request of the Zambian people is, let's ensure that we protect our democracy. Let us protect and defend the Constitution of the Republic, because it is our duty to do so. Let's also ensure that we give ourselves and our colleagues from the UPND the much needed checks and balances in a respectful manner, and let's ensure that we guide them, because no one holds monopoly over knowledge. We all have to ensure that we input and help our colleagues to govern this country well. If they fail, it means Zambians will have failed, as a matter of fact. I mean, right now I feel like we have failed as Zambia because I'm seeing a failed government. However, something can still be done. We can still have this government listen to our cries. We can still have this government having certain provisions not border on the Constitution, but rather on a subsidiary legislation to deal with certain provisions. So, colleagues, Zambians, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Comrade.
Thank you.
And comrades, thank you very much. It's only that the time was a bit short. We would have discussed more.
Indeed.
We can always come back.
Thank you so much.
Very
Closing remarks, Mr.
Yeah,
Shalala?
there's a big difference between Bill 10 and Bill 7.
What's the
Bill 10
difference?
of I mean, for example, the PF wanted to bring back deputy ministers, which we are not doing. They wanted to give the president more powers, which are in delegated legislation. For example, when the president appoints commissions, those commissions act on behalf of the president. The U10 was going to give the president back that power where he can act on behalf of commissions. We have not touched on all those that make a president more powerful than they should be. We are looking at very progressive submissions, most of them in terms of development. We are also looking at progression because population has increased, development has increased. We have to be progressive. I think the fears our colleagues have are not founded in the sense that most of the arguments they make are not tied to law. You will not find Mukandila or any of the friends quoting the law to say this bill is breaking this particular provision or that article. We are following Article 79. The procedure is very correct. That's how it's supposed to be done. Consultation is ongoing. Even now, anybody who's free can submit to the Minister of Justice. You can submit to Parliament at the time of committee stage. You can submit to the MPs before they go to Parliament. So it's actually a very progressive provision. Secondly, we don't have the majority in Parliament. So for us to pass this law, we will need support from the opposition. So if it will pass, it will mean that because it's a good law. It is a good law. We are very confident to pass because we know there will be support from the opposition. If it wasn't a good law, this would not pass the way Bill 10 failed. So I think speaking for the UPND and speaking on behalf of the government that we sponsor, we are happy with the provisions. We are happy with the support we've received from Zambians, and we know that we are doing this for posterity, and we also believe we are going to help the country in development by doing this amendment.
Mr. Shalala, thank you so much for coming through on the program.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mukandila as well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, dear viewers, thank you so much as well for watching Millennium Tonight right here on Millennium Television. Remember, you can catch us every Monday to Friday for Millennium Tonight. And tonight we're doing the platform where we featured the Constitutional Amendment Bill debate. I was hosting Mr. Celestine Mukandila, who is the National Youth Chairperson for Tonse Alliance, and the UPND consultant, Mr. Oliver Shalala, who came through as well on the program. My name is Ruben Mwanza. Until tomorrow night, it's bye for now.